Yeah. Welcome to the Tech Transfer Podcast. This is Dave Brown. I'm here today with Kirk Tomkinson, who's one of our great BYU MBA students. We've interacted a lot talking about tech transfer and other things. But Kirk, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us what the MBA program is all about, and some other things you're involved with there.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Kirk Tomkinson. I'm finishing up my MBA this semester. I have a background in engineering. Sometimes I tell my business friends I'm a recovering engineer.
Yeah.
But that's not true. I'm not really in recovery.
Did you work for an engineering firm between college and MBA?
Yeah. So
Okay.
I've got about 8 years of experience in the industry. Mostly I worked on Air Force contracts through different defense contractors, and did my undergrad at the University of Arizona. They have an optics program down there. Most universities, that's part of the physics department, but they have kind of a standalone one, and that's what I did. And just really enjoy sort of that technical side, and I also love the sort of the business of making putting things into people's hands. And so that's one of the reasons why I came to get my MBA, so I could learn all the things that they didn't teach me in engineering school.
Yeah, and a lot of MBAs are kind of tooling up to be sort of middle management in a corporation or something like that. But did you come from the start? Were you thinking entrepreneurship or?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've been through sort of different phases of what I decided I wanted to do, but one thing that has never changed is that I would like to be running my own company, either as a part of a partnership or as a CEO with a board of directors. It can look a lot of different ways, but I do know that I want to be sort of holding the reins, so to speak.
Great. And so the MBA program, they're giving you an overview of all these business practices. I did my MBA here as well in finance. So you're studying finance, HR, what else? Operations, all these issues. But
sure.
Yeah, which was a really fun part, I thought. But there's also a good entrepreneurial track at BYU. And we have kind of this core group of entrepreneurial students, including yourself, who are involved in that. So what's available to MBA students for entrepreneurship?
Well, when you go into the entrepreneurship track, you should understand that that you need to be able to do a lot of things fairly well. You don't necessarily have to be a specialist at any specific thing, but at the end of the day, you got to be able to do some financial modeling. You got to be able to get capital. You got to be able to run operations, or at least know enough to know when you need to ask, when you need to bring somebody else in.
All right. And so on the entrepreneurship track in the MBA program, are there a set of classes they put you through, or how does the program work?
Everybody in the program has the same core classes. And that ends up being about half of the classes that you'll take. And then elective classes are pretty much fair game. So some people, obviously, if they're in finance, they'll go really heavy into things like advanced corporate finance and financial statement analysis. Other people in the HR track, right? Maybe they'll. I don't even know what some of the HR classes are.
There are a lot of them. Yeah.
But in the entrepreneurship track, there are a few that are sort of like recommended. There's an entrepreneurship through acquisition class. There's some different classes where you actually get to start a venture either on your own, sort of as an independent study, or with a group.
Mm-hmm.
Some of that is linked to the Rollins Center, which is an organization within the business school that helps both undergraduates and MBA students build businesses.
Yeah, and the Rollins Center, well, the whole business school has made BYU one of the top entrepreneurship programs in the country. The Rollins Center is such a great help for students. They're in the Tanner building now, but they're going to move to a new location off campus in just a few months here, I think. South of campus will be great, and I'm looking forward to that. But Mike Hendren's the head over there. I know you've dealt with him a lot. You've had me over there to speak with entrepreneurship students. We brought in Chris Bryant, one of our entrepreneurs who's done a couple of companies out of tech transfer. And then at some point, you became familiar with tech transfer, maybe from Tom Peterson, who's a professor there, or someone else. How did you learn about us?
Well, I've known about, so I dealt a little bit with tech transfer in my career. So the Air Force specifically, they have a research lab called the Air Force Research Lab. Tech transfer is an important part of what they do. I've done some work with them. I've never licensed a technology from them, but I've done some work with them. So I sort of knew a little bit about it, not a lot, but I started to, actually Mike Hendren is the first person that I asked about it. And he was able to link me up, with you and with a few other people to start gathering information about what the office is, what it does, how it works, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point, Kirk. The people might not be aware that federal labs all have tech transfer offices, like any large agency you can think of. So Department of Agriculture has a tech transfer office. When I go to industry meetings, whether it's Licensed Executive Society or some other organization, there will be people from the federal labs there. So we're all kind of trying to get these technologies out there. And that's great experience. So you came and talked to tech transfer. Were you looking for technologies to license, or were you just kind of interested in the process?
Originally, I was just trying to learn. I wasn't sure if I wanted to sort of go all in on it or not. But I knew that it was interesting to me, and I wanted to know more. Somewhere along the lines, I decided like that. Yeah, this is what I want to do. But it didn't start that way.
Okay. And you are doing some other related things over there. So do you want to talk about Blue Forge for just a minute?
Sure. Yeah. Blue Forge is sort of a class, sort of a club, but the MBA program has these types of classes. They call them Learn, Do, Becomes. And most of those classes are more student-led. Blue Forge is completely student-led. And the goal of those classes is to get some actual experience. Blue Forge specifically, what we do is we're what's called a venture studio. So companies will come to us, they'll do a pitch. They usually come with a project in mind. And then after they've done a very short pitch, we see a lot of companies very quickly. Mm-hmm. So after they've done a very short pitch, we talk amongst ourselves. We have a council, and we decide who we're going to take on as clients. If we take them on as a client, we will do a 2-week sprint project for them on a project that they have identified. Sometimes we'll do more than one for one company, but the idea is to keep it tight. We're very lean. We don't really have much of a budget, and we try and provide as much value as we can, as quickly as we can. One of the understandings in that relationship is that if companies choose to use Blue Forge as a recruiting tool, there's entrepreneurial minded people in that room. So many of us are going to be negotiating, ownership of the company as a part of any potential employment deal.
Okay, and so that's great. So really, what you're providing, tell me if this is a realistic hypothetical. You could have some undergrad students. We have lots of undergrad students who license from technology, from tech transfer, or who start up their own thing. And so they could be just barely starting out. They won't have experience with financial modeling and some of the things you've studied in the MBA program. So they come and present to Blue Forge, and then you're giving them kind of that MBA level analysis. Is that kind of how it works?
We have done some work with startups. We tend to prefer to work with companies who are in revenue at least.
Okay.
And generally what it becomes a question of is, in an ideal situation, it's not a question of whether or not your business is viable, but what is the next step you need to take for growth.
Okay. Okay. So slightly more advanced companies then. All right.
That's the goal. Yeah.
That's got to help you out with your own aspirations and thinking about starting a company. You mentioned that you're interested in being an entrepreneur and launching something yourself. What are your plans for the future? What do you expect or plan to do?
Well, there's a few options on the table right now. As I mentioned, with my technical background, um, I really enjoy taking part in that, even if I'm not, you know, totally immersed in doing the technical work. Um, I enjoy being a part of it. I enjoy sort of managing and mentoring other engineers. And so what I'd like to do is find a viable technology to license and be able to put a team together and bring something to market.
Okay, great. And why license? Like some entrepreneurs would say, well, just find a problem, come up with a solution. What do you see as the advantages to licensing a technology from a university, or it could be a federal lab or where?
The main advantage I see is that, the research and development has, in large part, already been done for you, which is kind of a money sink.
Yeah.
And so if you've got an admittedly immature technology, but the concept at least has been proved,
Mm-hmm.
then you don't need to pump a lot of money into building a solution. You've already got a solution. It's a little bit sort of turns on its head what we would normally do. Normally we'd find a pain, build a solution.
Right.
Tech transfer is kind of upside down. The solution exists, and then we have to find, is there a market for it? Where could this solve a pain? And so the first initial steps of that is going to be a lot of market validation and that kind of work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. And to your point, like ideally in business, I think you want to be more like a venture capitalist. You want to have a bunch of experiments run and then follow the winners, right? And so with university technologies, if you find a technology that you like, maybe it'll be something the university's invested $500,000 in. And so you think, wow, $500,000, that's a great investment. But that's actually just the tip of the iceberg, because that much money was invested in 10 other technologies too, and they didn't work. Like they didn't pan out the way we thought. So this is the winner. And so you're kind of starting with the winner. And you probably know this, but the numbers show, like for medical device companies, your odds of success are 4 times as great if you license from a university as opposed to doing your own thing. So, and this is why.
Yeah, I mean, medical specifically is an area where the regulatory environment especially makes it incredibly important that the product be developed correctly from the beginning. I think we all know some cautionary tales of products that have made it to market and then got into some regulatory issues that ended up jeopardizing their business.
Yeah, and there are so many that never even make it that we don't hear about for the same reason, right? So so you've been very proactive about reaching out to our office, like educating yourself on tech transfer yourself, researching technologies and so on. What would be your advice for other MBAs who want to learn about tech licensing and maybe don't know what to do?
Sure. I mean, I'll give you the MBA answer. It depends.
Right.
But more seriously, I mean, just like anything else, if you're breaking into a new industry, there's going to be a lot of legwork at the beginning. Even just identifying who's the right person to ask about this. But we do have several groups in the MBA program. For example, we use Slack for a lot of our communication. So there are some channels focused on technology transfer specifically and learning about that. And then there are channels for entrepreneurship and things like that. So, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to like find somebody to ask. And if they don't know the answer, maybe they know someone who does. In fact, Oh, sorry. I was
No, go ahead.
just going to give a quick example. We were talking, before the camera started rolling about a conversation I had with somebody earlier today who used to work at BYU and works at a different university now. And the only reason I knew that person existed, the only reason I knew to reach out to him was that I had asked somebody, a different faculty member at BYU.
And then he was very forthcoming and answered a bunch of questions, spent a lot of time with you, right?
Oh yeah, it was great. We had an excellent conversation. We started building a relationship. I think both of us are planning on talking more. I got to kind of process some of the data I gathered.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, and we always say that as a student, you should play the student card. Like MBA students are going to be a little more mature. You work for 8 years between college and MBA program. At a minimum, I would say almost all MBAs have worked at least 2 years between college and MBA, right? And so it's kind of minimum standard, I would say. And so you have some real world experience. You're coming back, and yet here you are a student again. So you can really play the student card and probably get access to professionals, industry people that would just be hard to reach otherwise. Is that fair?
Yeah. But I think beyond that, there's sort of a principle behind that, that I think can be applicable even when you're not a student. And what it is that people are much more likely to open up to a person who's seeking learning, who's wanting to learn something, right? If you go to somebody and you ask them to do something for you, it's less likely that you're going to get much of a response. If you go to somebody and say, hey, and it needs to be a warm lead, right? You say, so-and-so from this organization mentioned that this is the space you work in. It's something I'm interested in. I'm trying to collect some information on it and see what, if it's something I want to pursue. Can we sit down and talk for 15 minutes sometime? And granted, I do think that works really well when you have the student card. But I do think that same approach can be helpful when you're not a student.
Yeah, that's fair. That's such a great tip. So with entrepreneurship and with tech licensing, especially for me, there's kind of a make the world a better place aspect to it. Like we have these technologies sitting in universities. They all solve problems for someone. Wouldn't it be great if we just got them out into industry where they could help people, right? Do you feel like you're motivated by some kind of idealistic impulse like that? Or is it more just that this sounds fun and how you want to spend your time? Could be both either. There's no right answer.
There's certainly a bit of both. The child that still lives somewhere deep inside of me just likes to do fun things. But yeah, I mean, definitely you think about as a society, if we're investing in these solutions, and we end up basically striking gold. We find something that works, that solves a problem that nobody has ever solved before. It's a little bit kind of tragic if that idea just never goes anywhere or dies, right? So yeah, to some extent, I think there's some responsibility, and this is why the business side is so important to technology transfer. That
right,
the solutions already exist. It's our job to figure out where the market is and to get it there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. We have a team of validation interns right now. We're going through some of our technologies, trying to find the right market fit, just exactly what you were talking about a moment ago, saying, is there a market? Who's the right group? And I told them just the other day, you need to understand the technology, but don't get too bogged down on that. What you really need to understand is what solutions being provided. Like, what is the value proposition? Because what we're looking for is the business application. And that's when a technology doesn't make it to market, that's usually what's been missed, right?
Yeah, I would say there's two parts of it, right? Is there a market is one question, and can we scale it is another question. That second question, I do think you don't need to be the technical expert, but you do need to find the right technical people to ask, because those are two different questions. There might be a market, In fact, the person I was talking to earlier gave me an example of a battery technology that was excellent. And they had talked to a fairly prominent manufacturer about incorporating it, and then they asked, okay, well, how much does it cost to build these things? And it turned out that it was just prohibitively expensive, especially for a consumer product. So
Yeah.
maybe
Right.
put that on the shelf for a few years.
Yeah. Yeah, we have those things. And then there's also in tech transfer, we have, I don't know how many active technologies we have here. It'd be somewhere around 800, I would say. And I don't know, usually that sounds like a lot to people, but for some of them, our professors like doing cutting edge research. So some of them are just too early, or some of them have, like you're talking about with a battery technology, some of them manufacturing hasn't caught up to where it would need to be in order to get this out in the market. But we do have things that sit around for a few years and then the time's right. And then people feel the pain point or whatever. So there is some patience, and you have to kind of tolerate disorder from tech transfer a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, lasers are actually a pretty good example, right? For a long time, the cost to manufacture a laser was so prohibitive that there were only certain industries who could use them. But manufacturing catches up eventually, and now we go get in trouble for pointing them at airplanes and things like that.
Right. So common. Yeah, they're everywhere. Or our technology, volumetric display technology, I bet you've seen from Daniel Smalley here. It uses numerous lasers to move particles around in the air and light them up and so on. And it just wouldn't have been affordable a few years ago, but now you can. Sure. So based on your experience, Kirk, what do you see as kind of the big challenges in tech transfer?
I think the biggest challenge is communicating between disciplines. So you have highly technical people, and even though we're all speaking English, they have their own set of words. Some words that mean something to them might mean something else to a business person. And I think that is honestly one of the biggest hurdles is just understanding each other when you're trying to take these business functions and technical functions and really point everything in the same direction, get alignment. And then obviously the market finding a market can be tons of work, but if you don't have that alignment, you could find the market and miss it, which is like pretty disappointing.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, the first point you made, you can visualize tech transfer as being kind of a translation center, like a meeting point between the academic universe and the business universe, which, they are very different in some fundamental ways. There are some of our professors are so good at doing both. Like we've had professors who work really well as a consultant in a business or something like that. But many of our professors will say, look, I'm not a business person. I don't want to be. That's you guys. We're just, please hand this technology off. So we get all kinds of things. But then another translation point, I think, is just on campus, just between our students. We have some very entrepreneurial students in, say, life sciences or engineering or phys math, these other departments, and they don't want to be business majors. Like they're into the technical issues, like you probably were when you were an engineering student, right? But then we have all these business entrepreneurs too. So I was talking to the president of one of the co-founders of the AI club here. We're trying to work out an event where they meet up with business students, because I get business students all day long saying, I need to find a programmer to work with. And then the programmers are saying the same thing. So we just need to kind of connect people sometimes too.
Yeah. And I know the Rollins Center is also doing a little bit of work trying to figure out how we can be sort of a switchboard. I'm actually helping them with that a little bit. We've had some ideas that they're not quite ready to talk about yet, but they're interesting.
Good. And so let's talk about the Rollins Center for a second. You're very plugged in there. If anyone doesn't know the difference, kind of tech transfer manages intellectual property that belongs to the university generally. So we're licensing that out to industry. The Rollins Center. And so in the process, we're going to work with a lot of student entrepreneurs. We launch startups. It's our number one thing that we enjoy doing here. And if they can be student startups, that's even better for us when there are opportunities for that. But there are plenty of student startups that come out of BYU that aren't university technologies. They're just students doing their thing. And we've had a number of unicorns, right? We've had Omniture, who else is really big? Um, uh, oh, come on, the Ryan Smith, Qualtrics.
Oh,
Okay.
Qualtrics, sure.
Like a
Uh,
bunch of huge companies that were student startups. And so many student entrepreneurs will work through the Rollins Center. They're a center. It's in the business school, like we mentioned, works specifically with students, and they have some funding opportunities and other resources. So I'm going to fix my video for a second, but you want to talk just about some of the resources at Rollins Center and what you've learned over there?
sure. I'd say the most important resource, and this is true regardless of what you're talking about. I think the people are the most important resource. So there's some people there who are very well connected. They have extensive networks that they've built over a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
You can go there, and if you have a question about whether or not something can be manufactured, like they'll tell you who to talk to. They'll send you their way, or sometimes it'll even be a former student who's faced basically the same problem and has overcome it. So that's an incredible resource. They have monetary resources. They do a lot of grants. So there are different levels. A validation grant is worth $500, and the purpose of that is to validate the market. They have some different traction grants, I think they call them.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And those can be different sizes, and all things told, if you run through the whole program and you've been able to validate the pain and the market and the product, I want to say you can win up to like $27,000, I think.
That sounds about right. And there's also the Ballard Center, which is more for nonprofit ventures. There,
Yes.
it's possible to do a student startup that would be a nonprofit venture, but also not a nonprofit, humanitarian, but also a startup that would meet the Rollins Center qualifications. So at the Ballard Center, I don't know the numbers, but it's something in the neighborhood of $25,000 of grants too. So potentially a student startup that's positioned just right could receive $50,000 of grants. That's going to get you a long ways towards, selling a product to someone.
Sure. Yeah.
And then I don't know, since it's undergrad, you maybe wouldn't be involved in the Sandbox program, but there's these other educational things the Rollins Center does that are great too, right?
Yeah. I've not been involved with the Sandbox. I know just a little bit about it. But there's also, they have Crocker Fellows. Is that engineering? I always, because they're so closely, since they work so closely together, sometimes I forget.
I'm not sure where it's
who's
housed.
in charge of what. Yeah.
I'm not sure where it's housed, but Gary Crocker is, I believe, an alumnus, but he's licensed multiple technologies from BYU as well, and has succeeded with a number of companies. And then he has just donated funds for this Crocker Fellow program, which I don't know the details, but with top students who are interested in entrepreneurship, they give them funding to help their startups launch. So pretty great. So those are some great resources. I always tell people will ask, why don't you have an incubator by BYU? I'll say BYU is an incubator. There are all these resources right there and really some great benefits if you're a BYU student. So if you had to guess, like 5 years from now, where do you hope to be with your startup or whatever you end up doing, Kirk?
5 years from now, I want to be running a technology company. I want to be providing jobs for new engineers and new finance majors. And I used to, it's funny. I used to think I wanted to make a bunch of money so I could retire early, which I think is common for people to want. And I realized somewhere along the way, like, I enjoy working. I want to work.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to work on the things I want to work on.
Right.
And technology transfer is one of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so great that you mentioned creating jobs. Almost all job creation in the U.S. comes from startup companies. If you have a massive company, the way you make things more economical is to do more with less, have fewer employees. But when you're a startup company, you're just growing as fast as you can manage. Yeah. And so that's all kinds of good for people. And most entrepreneurs I talk to who are successful with one of our technologies or whatever company will say that a major source of both stress and satisfaction for them is making sure that their employees are taken care of, that, they can make payroll this month or do whatever to keep those people's livelihoods going. And then one other final point that I thought you mentioned that was really good is university tech startups disproportionately provide high paying jobs. Like when we have, Smart Vision Works that exited last year, when they were employing, I don't know how many people it was, but I don't know, 40 to 100 people or something, maybe more than that.
I think he said 80.
Was it, okay, that sounds about right. Because Chris came and spoke about it. That's right. So 80 people, but you got to understand that's 80 people, most of whom probably had graduate degrees from the university, that or from some university, people who would really had high-end qualifications and were making good livelihoods for their families. So
they tend to be quality jobs, I would say.
That's right. Well, good. In terms of last set of questions here. If you were to give me advice for tech transfer, how do we engage better with MBA students? What do you think works best?
That's a good question.
We try to be like our startups. We try to be innovative and experiment. And you and I have tried several experiments this semester, right?
Yeah.
But what do you think tends to work best?
I think the main thing, especially for first year MBAs, is you got to get on their radar as soon as possible, because the demands on your time that first semester are so intense that anything that doesn't make it in the queue in the first couple of weeks is never going to get to the front of the line.
Yeah.
And I think so it really becomes a timing thing, especially for the first years. For the second years, it is a little bit different. But again, as many of them may already be committed to a full-time position at that point. And so then it's a different problem of, well, that sounds interesting, but I have committed to go to, XYZ company starting in May of next year. So
for anyone who doesn't know, an MBA program is 2 years. So in between, you'll work somewhere that summer. And if you're taking a serious job that summer, it's at the end of the summer, they might offer you a position. So then at that point, it's possible to be a little checked out or just not looking for opportunities. Didn't mean to interrupt though.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I sometimes forget that, because my whole life is MBA right now. So it's easy to forget what people do and don't do and do not know. And it's very common for people to be getting offers either immediately after their internship or within the month or two following. And then at that point, it's important to kind of follow through with what you decided to do.
Yeah. I was a lawyer, so I'd worked at a law firm, came back to get my MBA, but I did the full-time program. So that summer in between, I thought it doesn't really matter what I do. I'm just going to go in-house with the corporation afterwards. And then I heard that tech transfer existed. So I came and worked here, and that's how I got sucked in. I didn't work at tech transfer prior to that. But then it ended up being this great mix of business and law, and it's been really good. So, but no, reaching out to MBA students early is something we need to do better at. We'll work on for sure.
Yeah, I'd say that would be kind of the low-hanging fruit, in my opinion. Is just get on the radar as soon as you can. I think it's fair to say that a lot of the students just aren't going to be terribly interested, but the ones who are probably going to pursue it as long as there aren't too many things that get in line in front of it.
That's terrific. Thanks for the great advice. We're trying to also, you'll see it in some videos we post about technologies and things. We're trying to lay out a better roadmap for students too, because things like tech transfer can seem very complicated to people, but we've simplified it a lot. Tell me if you disagree, but the agreements we do, like an assignment agreement, is pretty simple. And then we have some technologies, widgets or simple software things where you can be to market pretty fast. So try to make the user experience better too.
Yeah, I mean, software is great because the number of disciplines required to develop it is low, and you don't need to worry about manufacturing. But I think another thing that and you mentioned this, some MBAs, especially those who don't have a technical background, just the name technology transfer can be a little bit intimidating for them. And so I've been trying to, in my communication with my classmates, I've been trying to focus on the idea that, like, the technology piece, that's what the other colleges do.
Right.
The transfer part, that's our job. Our job is the transfer part.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't know if that's something you'd want to consider when you're building the messaging about like the transfer part is where we need you guys. Don't worry so much about the technical side.
That's super interesting. That some universities, they've rebranded and they don't call it tech transfer anymore. It usually still has tech though. It's usually like tech commercialization or something. That's great because I can completely see how I'm not a technical person. I'm a business law guy where, that could make me think that's not for me. And if anyone's wondering, in a typical startup for us, either a faculty inventor or a grad student who worked on the technology will end up being part of the company in some way, like a consultant or advisors or something. So you're not going to be just handed this high tech something to go off with on your own. Like there'll be a
fun, kid.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't shoot your eye out.
Good luck with that. But we want to launch companies that succeed, and so we need a technical founder usually to be a part of that equation. But well, good. Well, thanks. That's some really great advice, Kirk, and thanks for all you've done this year to help us connect with the MBAs. Appreciate you taking the time to explain it and talk to us a bit here today.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, thanks.